tariff-related uncertainty roiling markets since the president took office in January. For more on this, I want to bring in Philip Luck, CSIS Economics Program Director and former State Department Deputy Chief Economist under the Biden-Harris administration. Thank you so much, Dr. Luck, for being here this morning. Talk to me about this threat of secondary tariffs, sort of a made-up term from the president here. What is the potential impact of that on the tit-for-tat and pending trade war that we are seeing?
Well, you're right. It is a bit of a new term. I mean, he might be borrowing it from the idea of secondary sanctions, which is something we've used in Venezuela and also in the oil industry. The largest importer of Venezuelan oil right now is the PRC. Much of the oil that's being exported by Venezuela is using the exact same shadow fleet that is developed to circumvent the oil price cap in Russia. So basically, anybody who's importing Russian oil right now, they're also probably importing a decent amount of Venezuelan oil. So this would increase tariffs on the PRC, which we've already put on universal tariffs of 20%. So that would probably result in some retaliation and furthering of this trade war.
And as someone who has worked in international trade, the economics of international trade, how do you rate this idea that April 2nd is going to give investors more clarity on tariffs, and that maybe April 2nd we will get clarity on negotiations that make these tariffs not so bad for markets?
The only thing I'm sure about of April 2nd is there'll be remaining uncertainty afterwards. I mean, as your previous speaker just mentioned, it may not come in every single way that they've talked about. It kind of can't possibly do so. A full reciprocal tariff regime would be a change of 2.6 million new tariff codes, which is not going to happen. But we'll probably see some increases in tariffs, and I don't think they'll be fully imposed. So it'll increase uncertainty. And I think this is a really key point, because to the degree to which we're trying to give our partners incentives to respond to us, if we're trying to give industry incentives to invest in the United States, uncertainty does the exact opposite of that. So this uncertainty is a high cost with really no reward.
Right, but let me ask you a question. If everybody wants to play and try to come to the table the uncertainty, then I think there's a chance that maybe they delay them if there's an honest attempt to have the conversation. That's number one. But number two, let me ask you a question about this additional tariffs on China based on the Venezuelan oil story. If they impose 25% more tariffs on China on top of what's already there, then what do you think happens?
I mean, then you're coming to almost a 50% tariff on all things from the PRC. That's massive.
Right.
And those will be paid by U.S. consumers. So, I mean, that'll be huge supply chain disruptions at that point. So I think that I find that to be unlikely to happen. It's entirely possible that they don't even have a full accounting of where all this Venezuelan oil is going before they made this policy suggestion. So, again, that would be really economically harmful. To your first point about people coming to the table, I mean, that's entirely possible. The only thing I will say is, being here in Washington and talking to our partners at Embassy, they've been coming to the table. They've been coming. They're asking what they need to do to stop this from happening, and they're not getting answers. So from that sense, I really don't think there's much more our partners can do right now, because they're not getting clear instruction about what this administration is going to do and what the administration wants them to do.
As an economist as well, though, how do you see this playing out from an economic impact perspective? To what extent do you see the tit for tat on tariffs starting to weigh on the health of the economy?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an own goal in almost every single way. This is bad for our economy. Tariffs are collected on U.S. consumers and producers. This is a tax on Americans. The only way you get this to be paid by somebody else is if the foreign producers lower their price by the amount of the tariff. The evidence we have from the first tariff war and the first Trump administration said that we paid over 90% of these.
Right.
This is a tax on Americans. This will slow the U.S. economy. This is going to be distortive for producers. On top of that, you're going to get retaliation, right? So all the tariff revenue we brought in the first tariff war, 90% of that went right back out the door to bail out farmers who are hurt from retaliation.
Yeah.
So whether or not we end up supporting those who are harmed by the retaliation, that harm exists. So that harm is going to be in the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
The last thing I will note here is that imports and exports, those are the same firms. Half of all firms import and export or do one or the other. So this is
Phil,
massively
we got to leave it
disruptive.
here, unfortunately, but really appreciate you joining us today and excited to talk with you again soon.